Well, it's funny to me. I always came to this with the idea that shooting was the same as martial arts, right? I grew up, right? I'm a lifelong martial artist. I'm a lifelong shooter. I was born in Phoenix, where I joke at the time when you come out of the womb, doctor slaps you on the butt and says 410 or 22. That's how I grew up. Shooting to me was the same, and I always saw them as together.
Welcome to Aimpoint Taking Aim Podcast. I'm your host, Rich Nance. Here we'll take a deep dive into firearms culture and the Second Amendment lifestyle. From hunters to veterans, competitive shooters, police officers, tactical trainers, 2A advocates, and even some well-known celebrities, we'll cover it all. Today's guest is Cecil Burch from Immediate Action Combatives. Cecil's a lifelong martial artist who's trained with some of the most prominent instructors in the entire world. He's also an accomplished firearms instructor, and he specializes in combining those skill sets to provide his students with solutions in a weapons-based environment. This is one you're not going to want to miss. Stay tuned. Cecil, thanks for joining us today, brother.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a real honor. I appreciate it.
You know, I've followed you for a long time, not physically, but, online and all that. I knew who you were, and you have a good reputation online. And I figured one day we would meet. I knew you were in the Phoenix area. Yep. And just the other day, a mutual friend, while we were at the range, introduced me. And to be honest with you, I was a little annoyed initially because I'm trying to do accuracy testing on a pistol, and I'm like, come on, I don't have time for this right now. And then I realized it was you, and I was like, oh, so cool. And we hit it off, and I got my stuff done. I think you got your stuff done, and we still had a good conversation. Yep. So I'm looking forward to continuing that today. For sure. Your martial arts background is crazy. I mean, I like to think I have a pretty good martial arts background and pedigree, but you make mine look like I'm a white belt. So let's talk a little bit about how you got into martial arts, what age it was, and a little bit of a progression through all the different arts that you've studied. That's probably a good way to start this out.
That's a really nice way of saying I'm a giant nerd. that was a really tactically nice way of saying it, and it's true. And it's true. I have been a lifelong martial art nerd. I grew up bullied. I was born with really severe asthma, and in the early days, in the late 60s into the 70s, there wasn't any kind of real medicine for it. There was no such thing as rescue inhalers or any of the great stuff that we have now. So, and there wasn't a lot of great understanding of it. So, my mom would say, oh, hey, Cecil had an asthma attack in PE. And the answer that we know now is, we'll just keep working and build out of it. Well, the pediatrician was like, okay, well, I'll write him a note. He can sit out of PE. Well, great. Yeah. So now you get a target on your back. And then I was a book nerd anyway. I love to read. So I'm already, got my face buried in a book, and now I'm sitting off the side in PE and that kind of stuff. So, you have a giant marker on your back. So I was bullied. I always fought back, not well. I fought back. So it wasn't a continuous bully. Like it was every year. Like I'd have some new person every year. I'd get into a fight, usually get beat up, but they were like, it's not worth it because Cecil's fighting. Well, once I could get to the point where I could ride my bike down to the local martial arts studio in July of 1980.
What inspired you? What inspired you to make that trip? Was it because you're kind of being picked on for those reasons? Okay.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like a movie that you saw that got you all jazzed up. You're like, I want to be able to deal with these dudes that are giving me a hard time.
I mean, you watch movies, right? As a kid growing up, I read comic books, and, I grew up watching John Wayne movies and stuff like that. And there's that heroic ideal, but more it was the specificity of like, no, you know what? I'm not going to allow myself to be bullied or abused by somebody else only because I don't know how to defend myself.
And you knew you were going to fight those guys. Yeah. Against being bullied, but you just didn't know how to fight. So you wanted to educate yourself in that regard. That's cool.
Yeah, exactly. I knew I was like, I'll go down swinging, but I kind of got to the point where it'd be nice if I didn't go down. It was the other guy would go down swinging.
Sure.
So, and it was funny. I never told my parents. I was always ashamed of being bullied. So I just kept it in, even when I got beat up a couple times.
I think that probably happens a lot even today, that the kids just kind of, you're right, they're embarrassed, or they don't want their parents to intervene, call Jimmy's parents, quit, picking on Cecil or Rich or whatever. Yeah, that's
exactly. Yeah. So you just sucked it up. And so I never told my parents, hey, I want to, and they would have done it. Like if I'd have told them earlier, hey, I want to join martial arts, I want to go to a local karate school, whatever, to defend myself, they would have been all for it. I just was too ashamed. But once I had my own agency, so I could do it myself, could go down to the local dojo, American Karate Studios, and I never stopped, right? Since that day, I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with the ability to make myself better, more capable, that sense of accomplishment. And I kept going. Since that moment, there's never been a moment where I was not training some system under some instructor.
And what age was that, Cecil? How old were you?
I just turned 16. Yeah. Okay. I just turned 16. I know. I know exactly. It was the day. It was July 29th. It was the day after my 16th birthday, because I had my driver's license.
That's cool.
And I got my best friend and I said, hey, Larry, let's go. We've been talking for since then. And he was like, I'm down. Even though he was the cool kid. He never got bullied. Larry was always the athlete and the cool kid. But he's like, yeah, let's go do martial arts together. I signed up that day on my own.
So did you take to it right away? In other words, of course you were a beginner, but I mean, compared to other beginners, where would you rank yourself when you started? Was it coming pretty easy to you, or were you a hot mess, or somewhere in between?
I was the worst person that's ever stepped on a martial art mat ever in the history of mankind. Right?
Oh, man.
I joke with people, like when I'm teaching seminars and stuff, I was the kid picked last in dodgeball and PE. And that's very true. I don't have any athletic gifts. I mean, like I said, I was born with severe asthma. Mm-hmm. So when a lot of kids were playing Little League and doing that kind of stuff, I'm off to the side. So I think my athletic development, hand-eye coordination, gracefulness, and all that kind of stuff was lagging behind. So nothing that I ever did in martial arts up until I'd say in the last 15 years or so has ever come easy to me. It's always been a slog. Literally, the only attribute that I had going for me was that I'm super, super obstinate. I'm willing to keep my nose to the grind. If I want something and I'm enjoying the process enough, I'll stick with it. And that's just what happened. I was never that guy where the instructor goes, oh, this is my designated heir. I'm giving him the keys to the kingdom. Yeah. Mostly it was like, why the hell is this guy on my mat? Yeah. And what can we do to get rid of him? It's basically what it was.
I was 12 when I started. I watched The Karate Kid, and that was it, right? And now I got to watch Cobra Kai, which is kind of a cool, full circle world type of thing. Yep. But Karate Kid is what got me in martial arts. And a couple things. When I started, we're learning the kata and everything. And I was the slowest person to learn this stuff, and probably the most awkward, like you're saying. But I loved it, and I practiced all the time at home. And eventually those guys that were all way better than me as far as natural talent or natural ability, and maybe they kind of lost interest and they're doing some other sport or whatever, where I'm just martial arts. And it didn't take but a few years until I, really started to excel. And what I had going for me at such a young age, which I wish I still did, is I was very flexible. So the kicking and all that stuff came really naturally to me. But your first was kind of an American karate, you said?
Your it was first sort style? Of a blend of Shotokan, Taekwondo, and Kenpo.
Okay. Kind of sport oriented as far as point sparring and things like that?
No, it was really interesting. I got really lucky. It was very much a self-defense curriculum. The head guy was actually Joe Lewis's, one of his main training partners. Yeah. So their sparring was built in from the beginning. Fridays were sparring day. And then one of the other main assistants was an ex-Vietnam era Marine who worked with the South Korean Marines in Vietnam and fell in love with it and spent time in South Korea training with them. So he was the Taekwondo guy, but it was very much like a smash your face, direct idea. So it was funny years down the line when I saw other people do Taekwondo, I'm like, I don't recognize that. Yeah. That's not how I learned it. It was very much, it looked a lot much more like Shotokan karate.
Yeah. No, it's funny you mentioned that because I studied Shotokan, and not to be confused with Shotokan, which is very popular Japanese style, but the founders of both styles trained under the same master, and they're very, very similar. But I went to a Tang Soo Do demonstration, and I was like, wow, those kata are like 80-85% like the ones I'm doing. And so there is certainly that commonality that you see. Yep. And frankly, at some point, the katas become a little redundant. I think that you can focus too much on that. And, sure. One in the family starts with this block and then has, an upward block. And then the second one in that family has an upward block first. And it's like, do we really need all those different ways to do the same thing, to express the same thing? And
the argument is the same as in the gun community, 9mm versus 45 or something. No, you have to do this first. And then it's like, that's just a waste of time.
It's funny because I dismissed things that were Western to my detriment. I dismissed wrestling and I dismissed boxing. And it's because my inspiration for training in martial arts was, the Karate Kid, which Mr. Miyagi wasn't teaching boxing or wrestling. I want to learn these magical, Asian techniques that are going to help me kick anybody's ass. But boxing and wrestling, I want to get your take on it. And Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, of course, as well. You are doing something to someone who's trying to do the same thing to you. So one of the ways I've heard it said is it's not a real fight, but they're really fighting. And I think I'm not knocking all Asian martial arts, but in my experience, a lot of the Asian martial arts, take Aikido, for instance, there are principles from Aikido that are applicable in just about everything, even shooting, I would say. However, the training methods of the Aikido schools that I've seen involve harmonizing or blending with your opponent. So he's going to be a good bad guy. Well, if you're training for personal defense, self-defense, you want someone who's not going to be a good bad guy. You want someone who's going to be realistic and help you get used to some realistic pressure. So I'd like to get your thoughts on that, knowing that you have you're a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, you have a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu studio, you have a boxing background. So I'd like to get your take on kind of the training methodologies between, let's say, boxing and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which I know are very different, but similar in the sense that there's a sporting aspect that enables you to go basically full on.
Well, it's interesting. We can argue technique all day long, right? That's what you do in the martial arts, is this technique is deadly or this one and stuff. And it doesn't matter. What matters is, can I apply this technique when I need to, and will it do what I know it's supposed to do, right? Oh, this technique was used to kill Nazi sentries in World War II. That's awesome, maybe, but I can't practice that. My partner is not going to let me rip their throat out, not going to let me actually gouge their eyes. So how do I know that I'm actually going to be able to do that? The benefit of the combat sports is you do everything. Everything is, when I punch somebody, I'm punching somebody. If I'm going to choke you out, I'm going to choke you out. I'm going to throw you really hard. And then more importantly, and this is where I think sometimes people miss out, is it's done to you. Mm-hmm. Like, you can't fool yourself. You can fool yourself. It's like kids playing cops and robbers. I got you. No, you didn't.
Yeah.
That's like that traditional type of thing where we're not actually making contact. But if I take you down, mount you, you spin, I take your back, I put the choke on, and you go, okay, stop. There's no doubt that I had you. You're either going unconscious or you say, you got me. There's no misunderstanding. And I think that's super important. And the way you have to do that is the underlying part of all the combat sports, boxing, wrestling, judo, sambo, all of them, is the other guy has freedom of action. We do all these things in martial arts. Okay, we're going to practice. Exactly.
Yeah.
Grab my wrist. No, the other wrist.
Yeah.
Well, if I know what you're going to do to me, it's really easy to defend.
Yes.
Right. If I know this meth head is coming up to me at the gas and sip, and I know he's going to approach at this angle, at this speed, and he's going to reach with his right hand, man, I can look like Yoda, right? With my response. But that's not real.
And you know what? Not to take this in a different direction, but I think this is an interesting point to make. A lot of the law enforcement agencies, like in the 70s, when they started having doing away with height requirements and having more smaller officers, smaller statured officers, and maybe more book smart officers who weren't necessarily the athletes, right? Whereas the 50s and 60s, you had cops that were football players, wrestlers, whatever, and they would just, when there was force that needed to be inflicted, they were capable of doing that. They might not have been the best report writers, right? But now we have guys that can write reports. They can articulate their actions really well, and that reduces liability to the agency and everything else. But some of these people couldn't fight. So some of these martial arts instructors of the time would bring in their little compliant uke, and it would look like the techniques were magical, that this small little person can take down this huge person without causing any injury for anybody.
Yep.
And that small little person, first of all, has trained every day for the last 40 years. Secondly, he's training against his student who's not going to want to outshine the master. And police administrators were under the opinion that, these techniques could readily be taught and learned and applied on the street. And unfortunately, that's just not the case. And I'm kind of paraphrasing a study called Kaminsky and Martin, which kind of looked at a lot of that different stuff. It's an older study now, but very, very interesting. But that sort of explains, in my opinion, that sort of explains why a lot of the police agencies are stuck with more the Aikido based methodology as far as control holds and stuff. And it'd be interesting to get your take as a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and someone with far more experience in that area than me. In my experience as a cop, when I'm trying to put someone in a control hold, it's usually when they're not resisting. In other words, I do that preemptively. Hey man, you got a warrant, as I grab them or whatever. And then I'm in an advantageous position. But someone who's animated, it's very difficult. If someone is of relatively equal size and strength, it's going to be really hard for a person who's my size and strength to put me in a rear wrist lock if I don't want it to happen. But in law enforcement, that's taught. And then when that doesn't work and you punch someone's teeth out, then the question is, well, why are you punching him in the teeth? Why aren't you? Well, because what you taught me doesn't work. And I found myself having to dig myself out of this hole in order to get the upper hand. So,
yeah. It's correct. So much of martial arts is, here's the technique. I'm going to grab your wrist and twist it this way, and that will be a pain compliance to do this. Or even something like a rear naked choke, right? Lateral neck restraint. And so when we're focused on the technique, it works great with a fairly compliant, or at least non-resisting bad guy who's not doing something basic, twisting away, pulling the arm back, turning his hips, whatever. And that's the fallacy of, and it's martial arts in general who've always taught it this way, is we're very technique focused. Everything's technique. And, you look at, I remember, I think it was Inside Kung Fu used to in the 80s and early 90s. They had this comparison feature, style versus style. And it was this style doing, defending this attack
against the same attack. Yeah, I remember that. Yes.
Yeah. And it was like, that's not the point. It's not what you're doing against the other person. It's how you make that work. What's the driver behind the success of the technique? And so many of the martial arts, especially striking based or like the joint lock specialty group systems, Whereas grappling in general, but very much so Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, because and all grappling has the same basic underlying principles. It was a little more obvious with Jiu-Jitsu because Jiu-Jitsu kept its fighting focus, which is real funny to me because, everyone goes, oh, it's a sport. It's a sport. It's been a sport for about 30 years. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu has been in existence for about 100 years. So what was where was the gap? What was fighting that developed competition as a way to test stuff and to get different extra work in, but it still kept its core. And
that's not dissimilar to Colonel Cooper and, the old leather slap competitions to
absolutely.
see which works the best. It's not that they were interested in, quitting training for defensive use and they wanted to be athletes, combative athletes or shooters in a sporting capacity. It's just that was a way to test to see what worked best.
Exactly. And like with sometimes a shooting, you can get people who become a gamer. And I don't use that in a pejorative sense at all. It's just some people are more focused on, hey, this is a fun competition. I like doing this. And you take it that way. Same with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You got a lot of guys, especially over the past 10 to 15 years, or it's become a thing. You can make a really good living as a high-level competitor. And there's nothing wrong with that. It pushes the art. But at its core, even today, Jiu-Jitsu is still a fighting system. The basic tenet is, does this technique work against somebody bigger, stronger, tougher, faster, meaner, younger, less injured? If the answer is no, it's not accepted as a legitimate technique. It doesn't matter if it works in competition. If it only works against your peer, it doesn't become, that's a Jiu-Jitsu technique. And so what happened with Jiu-Jitsu was it was like, well, how do we make this work? How do I get the choke? How do I get this arm lock? How do I get this move to work against somebody who's bigger than me? And so you move away from technique and you move into more of the idea of structure, principles, foundation. Concepts, exactly. Base, posture, traction, position, pressure, head control, hip position, hand control. All these things, if I win those battles, I can pull off almost whatever technique I want. And if I lose those battles, it doesn't matter what my techniques are. I'm not going to have a chance to do it. And so we move away from, okay, I'm going to grab his wrist. I'm going to apply the pressure. Oh, he's turning this way. That doesn't work. Stop doing that. You're a bad training partner. No, now it's just like, hey, if I control you, if I control this position, if I can go side mount on you and I have head control and I have an underhook over here, you can't do anything. It doesn't matter that you're 300 pounds and I'm 130, right? And that's not hyperbole. You can go to any legitimate jiu-jitsu academy anywhere in the world, any night of the week, and you'll see that in action. You'll see the 130 pound person controlling the 250 pound person. No.
Is that one of the motivations for you to kind of, and I know you have an open mind, you have a very eclectic martial arts background, and I'm sure you apply aspects of all those various arts to what you do from a self-defense standpoint.
Sure.
But is that kind of one of the things that help you maybe settle on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as for lack of a better term, like your base system? Yeah. Is the ability of someone very small to do. And I'll be honest with you, if you're talking about a striking art and you have someone that's 150 pounds bigger than the other, it's possible. I mean, look at Jack Dempsey, right? It's possible for small guys, if they really know what they're doing, or gals, to get their body weight into their strikes, and they really could deliver a ton of power, a ton of energy. But it's cumbersome. It's difficult, right?
There is a physics limitation to even that.
Yes, to how much power you can generate. Yeah,
right. You look at Roberto Duran, hands of stone. Why do you get the nickname hands of stone? Because you hit really hard.
Yes.
As a lightweight, phenomenal. Welterweight, middleweight, phenomenal. Knocking people out left and right. How come he never fought at heavyweight?
Yeah,
where the money was.
Yep.
Because he knows that him and Hager, not even top 20 heavyweight, would have destroyed him in 1985.
Because in the striking arts, And in most things, size and strength are factors. Like they're not the decisive factor necessarily, but you can't assume that those are not factors. So is athleticism, and so is awareness. I mean, that's something that's often overlooked. But your ability to see it, like Dave Spalding says, to see a situation for what it is, then you might not need a sub 1 second draw and a zone hit at 7 yards. If you're able to give yourself more time, see a situation developing, maybe you draw your pistol covertly and you're prepared and you take a position to cover. So yeah, there's so much that goes into all this stuff, but talk a little bit, if you would, Cecil, about, so I know you've competed in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and you've had some success there. Talk about that and talk about the mindset involved and how that mindset and maybe even that training methodology helps from a defensive standpoint.
So the way I'm not a competitor in the sense like I'm going out and I'm putting all my effort into competes because I can go, oh, I got these medals or I did this. For me, it's always a test. It's always, okay, I think my physical skill set is this. All right. So what can I perform on demand the way I think I should against my peer? Okay, so competition is not fighting, right? We can agree on that, right? I know I'm going to go fight at American Nationals. Okay, cool. So I drive to Vegas. I know I'm fighting. My first fight's going to be whatever, 1 p.m. on a Saturday, and I'm in the bullpen for an hour ahead of time, and I'm warming up, and maybe I have a vague idea of my opponent. Maybe I've heard about him or something like that. Sure, well, it has nothing to do with the fight. But if I go out there and I can't perform at a basic level of the stuff that I know I need to, if I can't perform in that environment, how am I going to perform in the real world?
When the situation is even less favorable. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. If everything is okay, I'm feeling okay. You know, my weight's on point. I'm doing okay. I'm not super injured. I'm kind of set. I've used that time on that drive up to Vegas to start prepping myself. Like, fight. Here's your game plan. Do all that kind of stuff. And if I just fail miserably, man, that says something about, well, I need to fix this.
A reality check.
It's a reality check. It doesn't mean, okay, I won. Yay, I'm gold medalist, American national champion. It doesn't mean now I can beat everybody out on the street and I'm not going to perform perfectly, in a surprise situation. But I think I have a better chance of that than if I can perform under that competition stress. And I think that's what's missed with all this. It's an aspect that works towards fighting. It's not all of it. It's not all inclusive, but there's no way you can simulate a real fight. The best force on force with simunitions and all that with the best role players, it doesn't matter. It's still not a real fight because you're not going to die. So so all we can do is train as much as we can with as much new things. Right? Different things. Oh, I'm going to fight this guy. I've never competed against this guy before. And I got to fight at the time that's designated for me, not the time I pick. And I've got 5,000 people in the audience and X amount of people online watching. Here comes Cecil. He's getting ready to compete. Let's see if he can do anything. I mean, if you can kind of do something under that level of pressure, you probably at least have a shot under real world, oh my God, this guy's trying to kill me pressure.
And let's face it, Cecil, your competitor is probably going to be 10 times more skilled than, like Kelly McCann says, Bob the crackhead on the street, who's likely to come up to you and accost you. So if you can do things in that environment with a little bit of pressure, right? Like competition pressure, not life and death pressure, but competition pressure against someone who's skilled and trying to do the same thing to you. And he has all those advantages as well. Like he knows he's fighting you. He knows it's Sunday at 2:00, all that stuff, versus someone who comes up to you unexpectedly, thinks you're going to cower or thinks you're going to not be able to put up a fight. And suddenly, boom, whatever it is, you're right into it. So yeah, if you can hold your own in that environment, then yeah, you're probably pretty well set up for success in an attack on the street. Of course, there's other factors. You got the potential of weapons and everything else. And that's what I really want to focus on with you, Cecil, is, how, I know a lot of our listeners and a lot of people that watch this podcast are shooters, and they're definitely not martial artists to your level. But I want them to realize, that just being a shooter isn't the entire solution to a self-defense problem. You're far more likely to have to use an empty-handed response, right? Because most threats that we face don't rise to the level of deadly force.
That's documented. That's empirical data.
Yes. And so if you just get your concealed carry permit, and slap on a gun and think that you're going to be able to defend yourself, that you're prepared for that, it's absolutely not the case. I tell people that the actual qualification, shooting, the act of putting your gun up, seeing the sighting system and pressing the trigger to get a hit, that's the easy part. The hard part is, again, seeing a situation for what it is, knowing whether or not it's tactically sound and legally appropriate to intervene in a situation, and having some idea of how this could go down. If I have my young kid with me, maybe I don't get involved. If I'm there by myself and someone is attacking a young kid, maybe I do get involved. So everybody sort of draws a line at a different spot, but there's so many variables. But that's a long-winded way of saying that just having a gun is not the solution to your problem. Even if you have a 1 second draw, sub 1 second draw, even if you're a phenomenal shooter, that's still not always the case. With cops, we would train in weapon retention. And when your gun is in hand and someone grabs it, well, the answer that everybody says, and I know that you've heard this as well, because I've read you saying this, I'll just shoot him. Well, it's not that simple. So first of all, if someone grabs my gun, they're probably not going to stand directly in front of the muzzle. They're going to avert the muzzle. And now if I press the trigger, I have a round going God knows where, right? So I'm potentially endangering uninvolved people. Also, if it's a semi-automatic pistol and it's got a hold of the slide, that one round may fire, but then you're going to have a malfunction. And we all know that one round, even at close quarters with a 9mm, let's say, is you can't reliably count on that to stop the threat. So even if you're the best shooter in the world, you still need to have an ability to fight your way to that gun in a situation where you're hands on with someone, and B, to retain that gun in a situation with you're in a fight, or perhaps you're clearing a corner in your house and someone grabs hold of your pistol. Just shooting them off isn't the answer. So you have to have some empty hand skills to augment your ability to use your pistol in a defensive situation. So talk a little bit about that, if you would, Cecil, and you could feel free to be more succinct than I just was.
I don't know. I'm not good. When I start talking about this stuff, I'm not that succinct. Well, it's funny to me. I always came to this with the idea that shooting was the same as martial arts, right? I grew up, right? I'm a lifelong martial artist. I'm a lifelong shooter. I was born in Phoenix, where I joke, at the time when you come out of the womb, doctor slaps you on the butt and says 410 or 22. That's how I grew up. Shooting to me was the same, and I always saw them as together. So it was funny. Then about 1983, Masad Ayub wrote a brilliant book called The Truth About Self-Protection. And it was it was sort of the beginning of this idea, this multidisciplinary approach. He had a chapter on locks for your home. He had a chapter on the right kind of dogs. Whether you get
kind of a holistic approach to it.
Exactly. And it was all these things. And martial arts, empty hands was one. Guns were one. There were this continuum of stuff. They're both important. And let's be clear. The gun is in a very, very narrow niche. However, in that niche, there's nothing better. In that niche, you better have the gun. You could be best martial artist Gordon Ryan, greatest no-gi grappler maybe he's probably ever walked the planet. One-on-one, he's probably going to destroy people. Maybe two-on-one, he'll destroy people. You get to 3-on-1 and more, he's taking a beating. The only thing that's going to help him is some kind of force multiplier. So each thing has an important role. You don't have to do all of them. You don't have to be a master. You don't have to spend a lifetime like you or I have as trying to be a shooter and a martial artist and pre-fight threat management and, OC spray and knife and impact. You don't have, but you better have a few things that you are at least functional in to cover this ground. You and I can both agree. Handgun, I think that's a must. You're an American. You should have an understanding of using a firearm for self-defense. OC spray, I'm a pretty big fan, right? But again, that's a niche. In its niche, it's great. Outside of a guy who's more hostile, if that guy really wants to push the attack, OC spray does nothing for you.
Yeah. I mean, you may use the canister to hit him with it. That may be more
exactly.
effective. But, no, it does. It's a deterrent to all but the most highly committed attacker, I would think. But,
right.
Here's an interesting thing, and I don't mean to disrupt your thought there or your line of thinking, but, in the police academy, remember, we all got pepper sprayed.
Right.
And you would see guys go to get pepper sprayed before you as you're anticipating getting this burning sensation all over your face and your eyes. And you see tough dudes, Marines getting pepper sprayed, snot coming out of their nose. They're crying, everything else. So it's like, oh man, you're telling yourself, this is going to suck. This is going to suck. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You see what it's supposed to do because the effect it had on your classmate. And then with you, but in the street, the bad guys don't know that they're supposed to go and go down. Sometimes it just pisses them off. So you have to be, pepper spray is a great option, just like anything else for a cop or even their civilian applications of a taser. Again, a great option that may work like a charm, but you better have a backup. And one thing that I was taught, his name is I'm not 100% sure of his name right now, so I'm not going to quote it, but it was a law enforcement seminar, and he said, as a cop, your hands are your first and last line of defense. Right. So at the lowest level, you're escorting a drunk somewhere, right? And at the highest level, you can't get to your gun, everything else, that's all you got. So you always have to have those skills. And I think that's applicable to private citizens as well.
Well, for sure, because I would argue that no other tool is as versatile as empty hands. Like you said, I can go from pure non-lethal on up to lethal. Mm-hmm. You can't do that with any other tool. Can't do it with
a great point.
With a slap, can't do it with a knife, can't do it with a gun. But I can cover so much ground. And plus, it's software. I can never, ever be disarmed. You put me to the most, I like traveling. I'll go to the UK. I've taught in Singapore, stuff like that. I'm not carrying a knife. I'm not carrying a gun. Can't even carry OC spray. But you know what? I can fight. You cannot disarm me because of that. At the very least, I've got a fighting skill set that is with me 100% of the time, no matter what.
And also from that, you have developed the ability to recognize and utilize items in your environment that could be used as a weapon. I have a coffee mug here, right? But I could use this. It may not be like Kelly McCann says, maybe not a fight ender, but a fight bender, right? You smash that over someone's face, and then now you have a window of opportunity to escape or to draw your pistol or whatever the case is. Yep. But no, I think you're absolutely right about that. So I want to talk a little bit about your teaching. You have, when I talked to you about a month ago, I think you were in the process of sort of moving your Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu studio to a new location. Has that occurred already?
I'm in the middle of it.
In the middle of it. Okay.
I actually just dealt with the flooring guy yesterday.
Okay.
Hopefully, I think I should be up by June 1 with the new academy. I'm still teaching. I'm jumping around to other academies around the city, helping them out. And I just ran a class Monday night at another academy just because I love teaching. I love teaching. I had no desire to be a teacher. When I started this, all I cared about was making myself better. And I fell into teaching, through basically a back door. But I found I really love getting this information across to somebody. I've been teaching since 1987. At this point, I figured it out because I keep training logs. I've taught over 10,000 individual people face to face at this point. And I'm like, man, even if, let's say, only 10% actually got something super useful from me, I've positively affected over 1,000 people's lives.
Yeah. I mean, you're hitting on a great thing that I really feel fortunate about too. So I always thought I would just be a martial arts instructor, and teaching was really what I was passionate about. So I don't know, 18 years ago or something, officer.com sent out an email blast to members of, then it was called ASLIT, the American Society of Law Enforcement Trainers. And they were looking for defensive tactics columnists and columnists for different investigatory things and shooting. And so I sent in an article on edge weapon defense, and they liked it. And so first of all, I got no pay. I just got a little little advertisement, little banner on their website. But it was cool because I had people contacting me from all over the world. And I realized, wow, I may travel across the country, which at the time I wasn't, but I may travel across the country and teach 12 or 15 students, maybe up to 20, versus write an article. Now, you're not going to get as much out of an article as you are from a 3-day or a 2-day training seminar, but you're giving people an idea of a skill set that they may need to bolster that they didn't know before. So you could potentially make that person better just by a 1,500 word or 1,000 word article. It may ignite something in them. So then now they start getting the training that they need. And to me, as I consider myself a teacher, as a teacher or coach, I find a lot of gratification in that. And it's weird because the gun writing I thought would be a way for me to teach more courses. I had no idea that it was going to be a thing in and of itself, but I do enjoy it for that reason, where you have so much more reach, and it's, you never know. I mean, you never know when you're doing good things, how it may benefit a good guy. And yep. It's cool. I mean, just putting that information out there is very valuable. So
that's one of the frustrations sometimes of writing a blog or writing something online. You might not have a ton of interactive response, and you're like, man, was this,
did anyone like it? Yeah,
exactly. And then a year later, 2 years later, somebody comes up to you at a seminar or at a training conference or some situation, goes, man, Cecil, that article you wrote about this, that was so important to me. And I started doing jiu-jitsu, or I started seriously taking my shooting, but whatever it was. And you're like, I never knew, but I have a major positive impact on that person's continuing future with just something that maybe took me an hour to write.
Yeah, because you're writing that out of your head. That's what I call it. In other words, you already know it. Like if you ask me to write about reloading a pistol or write about, delivering a jab, those are things that I don't have to research. I mean, our whole life has been researching, you know what I mean? Yeah. But, so it's cool. It's cool to sometimes write things like that, that you like. Now, tell me about the work you're doing with Personal Defense Network. You're doing, contributing pretty frequently to that, or
I used to a lot.
Okay.
Yeah. I used to a lot. I wrote fairly frequently for them. I kind of gone over a couple of years. My wife had some health issues and stuff, and so I kind of slowed down a little bit. I'm just kind of getting my feet back under me, trying to be a little more public, trying to go, you know what? I think I have some decent ideas, and I'm going to get them out to people. So that's just kind of been in the last 6 months, trying to get back to that level of stuff. I've got a laundry list of videos in my head that I need to film to put up on YouTube and stuff like that. Now it's just carving out time to do that kind of stuff.
And it's hard. I mean, if you're like me, I think you're about my age, but it's tough. The social media stuff is still, I'm not, it's funny with Guns and Ammo. I'm the tech editor. Nobody that knows me would ever accuse me of being, good with technology, but when it's firearms related, there's a better chance. But, what kind of seminars do you do? I mean, I know this, but I want you to talk about the type of seminars that you do and some of the more memorable ones, maybe someplace that you've traveled to or some unit that you were able to teach that was really gratifying. Tell us a little bit about what it's like to travel around and kind of take the show on the road on the seminar circuit.
So I do 2 basic seminars. This is my fundamental coursework. One is my Immediate Action Combatives coursework, 2.5 days. day and a half on the ground and then a day standing. And it's basically, it's not trying to teach somebody to be a grappler. It's you found yourself in an entanglement. You didn't want to be. Maybe you fell. Maybe you got knocked down. Maybe you got pushed down. Guys on top of you. What do? Not turning you to a jiu-jitsu guy, but what do you need to do to at least survive and get to a neutral position from there? While there might be multiple opponents and while there might be the presence of weapons, either on the bad guy's part, your part, or both.
Now, I bet that would be beneficial even to highly skilled BJJ guys who have never messed with that nuance. So not only for guys that aren't skilled in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but those who may have never looked at that approach.
I've done it. I've had Jiu-Jitsu black belts come to my seminar, and I've also done seminars at Jiu-Jitsu schools specifically for this. And it's always, everybody's like, oh, wow, I didn't even think about that. Because it's not a one-for-one transference. Just like shooting is not a one-to-one transference into the fight. There's other issues that you have to striking. Same with striking. Oh, okay. Striking in the academy is one thing, but now what if, multiple opponents? What if the guy's got a knife on him? You have to actually put some time into doing it. Now, the beautiful thing about jiu-jitsu is it's a little easier transfer because the foundation is so strong. You understand how to control another human being. You understand all those drivers to do that. Now it's just, all right, let's make a 3-degree shift in attitude and look at these issues. What if he's got a gun? It's still the same. I still have to control his hands because that's how he's going to stop my guard pass. That's how he's going to defend the submission. That's how he's going to submit me. So I still have to control the hands, but now, he could start striking. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, he can get a weapon out. Oh, he can get my weapon out because I'm a cop or I'm a private citizen with the CCW. I brought that to the table. So you start showing it to these guys, and every now and then they go, I don't want to deal with this. This is too hard. This is too much on top of I've spent 10, 15, 20 years doing this. I don't want to feel like a student again.
I know you've seen that, Cecil, where people will defend what's clearly an inferior position because they've spent so much time, so much money, so much energy into whatever system they did that they don't want to acknowledge that there's fallacies, that their system, all systems are lacking in certain areas. But that is a pretty common thing where you just kind of kid yourself because you don't want to acknowledge the fact that, wow, was part of the last 10 years that I spent training in this system and all the money I spent was part of that learning something that doesn't have all the answers. And the answer to that is yes, no matter what system you studied, but you have to acknowledge that. And fortunately, I had instructors, and I'm sure you did too, that encouraged you to learn from other people. And those are confident instructors because they know that what they're giving you is good and they're confident in what they're teaching. And they think that you're probably going to come back. You're not going to leave them. Right. But there was a very traditional Okinawan karate school where I grew up. And I had a lot of friends in that school, and their instructor, who was very, very skilled, he prohibited them. He would kick them out if he found out they were learning something from somebody else. I don't understand that way of thinking. I mean, it may be good for a business sense that you want to maintain your dojo and build it up and not allow any students to leave, but you're not doing your students any favors.
And it's funny. I've never heard of a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu instructor tell somebody not to train something else. I've never heard that. I've never had somebody goes, Professor, I'm going to start doing this Thai boxing school down the street. I've never heard jiu-jitsu guy. Why are you going to do that? We have all the answers. It's like, oh, that's cool. But it's funny. All these other systems
there is that.
You don't need that. You don't need that. And let me be clear here. I was one of those guys. Okay. I'm not going to say I'm this enlightened human being. Like, I was a striker. Like, my base was striking. I hated jiu-jitsu. I loathed the very thought of rolling with another sweaty dude, that's gross. So what I did was my mind was, when I first started jiu-jitsu, was I'm going to do just enough so that if I do find myself in a grappling situation, I can at least get through it. But that's it. That's where it ends, because I love striking, I love punching, elbows, knees. I was a boxer. I love savate. I mean, I was a high level savate for a while there. I was like the highest guy outside of California.
I want to come back to that, but continue.
But what happened was, you start training it and you start to see the utility of the art. And even somebody as thick-headed as me, I went, wait a minute, this is working. It's defeating a lot of stuff that I thought I could use to defeat it. And it's allowed me to beat other people who I know in other situations could beat me. So there's something to it. So I think it's okay to go, oh no, I don't want to do this, but at least be open-minded to it, give it a try. And if it's in your face that this is truth, you owe it to yourself and to your loved ones to some extent that you go, all right, guess what? I was wrong. I was wrong about X, Y, and Z. And so now I'm going to do this. You don't have to abandon everything you've done before. I still do the striking stuff. I'll still dabble in Filipino and Indonesian martial arts. All that time. It's not like, oh, that sucks. It's just, it's not my main focus, because my belief is, and we were talking about this a little bit earlier, and I think I kind of went off on a tangent, but I think jiu-jitsu is the best bang for your buck. It's the best one where you can maintain a functional fighting set as you get older and weaker. I mean, I'm 60 at this point. I'm falling apart, but I can still go really hard against that 25, 30, 35 year younger.
You're not going to do that in boxing or Muay Thai. You're going to get
exactly. As much as I love those arts, as much as I love savate, I go against somebody who's 35 years younger than me. I'm being carried off the mat on a stretcher.
And let's talk about savate real quick for the non-martial artists. Okay. French foot fighting, right? Something that Bruce Lee was inspired by. Yeah. You also trained in Jeet Kune Do, correct?
Yeah.
Jeet Kune Do, for those
instructing.
For those who don't know, Jeet Kune Do is Bruce Lee's martial arts that he developed, which is kind of a distillation of a lot of martial arts. Bruce Lee's philosophy was to not keep adding more, but to chip away at the inessentials until you have something that's very practical. And that's great advice. So tell me a little bit about that, because some people have never heard of Jeet Kune Do. They've never heard of savate. They've never heard of some of the Indonesian martial arts, like Silat.
Silat, Penjak Silat, all these systems, Mastika, Kwitong, Tongkat, Silat.
And the Filipino arts as well, which are, you trained, I believe, to some degree under Dan Inosanto?
And Paul Vunak was my main instructor.
And that's direct Bruce Lee lineage for those who don't know. So that means you're getting it from, not directly from Bruce Lee, because that wasn't an option, but kind of the next best thing. Yeah. So talk a little bit about that and how that influenced your outlook on things, and maybe the similarities to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu from that stuff. Well,
the thing to this day that I still take away from JKD is that underlying idea of, listen, it's all about you. It's all about what you need to be able to do, what you can do, what your performance is, what you need for your context. It doesn't matter that this other guy loves whatever, Thai boxing. If that doesn't fit for you, then it doesn't matter. There's a lot of JKD guys who never got into the Filipino martial arts. And there's a lot of the guys who kind of were that lineage, but spend more time on the Filipino martial arts. It's all good. If you can make it work, if you can be a functional fighter with it, then there's not a single path. That's really what Bruce Lee was trying to get across. There's not a single path. And Dan Inosanto talks a lot about this over the last, 50 years, is there's not one single path up the mountain, right? Your path, I might meander around slowly. You might go straight up. This guy might zigzag.
And our paths may be different because we have different attributes or different limitations. So you can't just say, everybody do this. I'm going to make a strange analogy now. It's like a pistol. Some people are very good shooters with iron sights. I was a very good shooter with iron sights. Very good being relative, right? Not compared to some, but compared to, like, say, the average police officer or the average CCW guy. But then as my eyes age, I have a hard time seeing those. Therefore, the red dot. Red dot simplifies the aiming process. It's easier to see. I can shoot accurately with the red dot. So I don't have the same attributes that I had 10 years ago, in that my vision is going down. So I'm able to supplement that with, in this case, a tool that helps. You know what I mean? So but that flies in the face of, like, I remember at the police department, we issued one gun to every person. And if it didn't fit their hand, that was their problem. They had to figure out a way to fix it. And at some point we realized, you know what? Let's get a pistol with interchangeable back straps, or send this out to get cut so that this tool will work better for that officer, which helps the officer be more safe, helps the officer be more accurate and confident, which helps the citizenry that the officer is supposed to protect. So being able to adapt and realizing that there's not one style that has all the answers, or one style that's going to be best for everybody. I think that's a key thing to realize.
You know, so I've been teaching jiu-jitsu 20 plus years at this point. I've turned out a number of students at this point. I have literally one student who rolls and looks like me when he fights. One person out of thousands. And a lot of them, they started with me. Their first experience with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was me. And yet they don't look like me. They're not built like me. They don't have my mindset. They don't have my attributes or lack of attributes or whatever. So for them, they find a different path. They might take a lot of what I do, but then go, oh, this as well. Because of that. So you have to have this overarching conceptual framework of this is best practices for fighting. But hey, there's this room for this individual expression. And it's not simplistic, what works for me. That's not the point. That's a juvenile response. It's, you look at it, you make that critical decision, that risk analysis for you. Like you said, with the red dot, there might be some guy out there who's 25 years old, whose eyes are like, you know, he could play Major League Baseball, right? He could see that fastball coming and his eyes is great. Is he going to need a red dot? Probably not. And with a little bit of practice, he's probably going to be a kick butt iron sight shooter. So should we make him? Well, if you're not shooting a red dot, you're stupid. No, that's not true. But for me, I'm the same as you. My eyes have just gone down. My eyes have never been awesome, but now they're really in the tank. So for me, really, I kind of need a red dot on my pistol. But there's no one size fits all solution for this kind of stuff. So we as instructors, as teachers, our job is, here's as much as we can give you. Here's how you need to figure it out for yourself. I'm going to make you a critical thinker. I'm going to give you the information so that you can pick the best practices for your life that might look exactly like mine, or they might look completely different. But I'm arming you with the best tools possible for that kind of stuff.
And you're hitting on a great point, which is making the student do some critical thinking. You know, I go back to law enforcement a lot for analogies, but like you have this new kid who's in his field training program, and he's going to set up his belt the way they taught him in the academy or the way that his FTO, his field training officer, told him to. That might not be the best setup for him, but he doesn't know any better. And a lot of times I see people that they don't want to think for themselves. They want to say, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is the best because I heard Cecil Burch say that. Well, you know, you have to figure out what is the best for you based on your unique attributes and your unique shortcomings. So there is no best. You know, there are some that are better than others. Like when it comes to, I don't know your particular, in-hand pistol retention technique that you teach, but I bet it's not that dissimilar to the one I teach, because there's only so many things that make sense, that are practical. There's a lot of goofy stuff, but as far as something that gets you out of line of fire, well, I'm talking switching to disarms now, something that gets you out of line of fire, enables you to control the weapon, brings that weapon into your body. I mean, there's only so many ways that make sense if you understand, you know, human physiology and balance disruption and all that stuff. So it's cool. I mean, it's neat that there's such a variety, but yet you have to understand that not everything that you see out there is equal, right? There are systems that are better for personal defense than others. Like, for instance, I would say, and not that there's not an Aikido dude out there watching who can, wipe the floor with me, but I would say if someone asked me, what should I study, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or Aikido? And their main reason for studying was personal defense, I would steer them toward Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or boxing or virtually anything but Aikido.
Right. It's not to say, and again, like you said, that it's not that Aikido doesn't have stuff. I hate this phrase that comes up in the community is, well, it works. I saw this work in the real world. Well, everything works. Life is so bizarre. I mean, there's people who survived horrific car accidents without a seatbelt. Does that mean that all of us then should just take the seatbelt off because 1 in 50,000 people survive without the seat? No, it's best practices. What works most of the time for most people with a reasonable amount of training time. That's our standard, not what works. I mean, I've got issues with people teaching a lot of close quarter shooting techniques, right? You see a lot of stuff on the live fire range that I'm not a fan of. But you're never going to hear me say, well, that doesn't work. I'm never going to say that. I'm just going to say that's probably not the best thing to be doing. That's a suboptimal practice, not, oh, that's stupid. Don't do that. No, there might be this level of technique. There's this and there's this, and they all work. It's just how much time we're willing to put into it. How much does our lives matter to us? What can we perform ourselves? And for that person, that mid-level technique might actually be the one that makes the most sense.
Yeah,
Even
because
I would go, technically there's some issues with it, but maybe that's the best for them.
Yeah, sometimes just having a gross motor-based technique and some genuine intent goes a long way toward overcoming someone who has picture-perfect technique, but they're timid, they're holding back. And that's not to say that technique isn't important, because sometimes, as they say, the devil's in the details. Like the difference between having an effective wrist lock and an ineffective one, it's technique, but to rely on technique is scary. You want to have stuff that's going to work with you under that adrenaline dump, stuff that's gross motor based. And by that, I mean, for those who aren't sure, like something that, like a strike that utilizes your whole body, right? Like a right cross, for instance, versus, striking a pressure point on the side of someone's head or something like that. And your ability to do those gross motor based techniques, as you well know, Cecil, is going to be enhanced when you're in that duress of a real attack. Whereas your ability to conduct fine motor skills or perform fine motor skills is going to be diminished. Now, to what degree depends on how skilled you are, how practiced you are. Exactly. So there's a lot of variables there. As we start to wind down here, Cecil, because I can already tell we can talk forever. As we start to wind down, what advice would you have for someone who's a pretty competent shooter? They're safe and they understand, the fundamentals of marksmanship, but they maybe realize that they need to train a little bit more to thrive with their pistol in a close quarter environment. What are some general things that they need to seek out instruction in?
So I think you and I both made a pretty good case that having some empty hand component is a good idea. I would say, first of all, doesn't mean that you have to be like me and Rich, where we're on the mat 3, 4, 5, 6 days a week, hours at a time. You don't have to do that. You don't have to be the nerd like us, but be willing to put, if you put X amount of time into your shooting, right? If you're spending 2 hours a week looking online for the latest cool guy gear and you're dry firing and you're going to the range, then put similar amount of time, be willing to put a similar amount of time into your empty hand stuff. And I would lean towards grappling. And I know that sounds like, well, of course you say that, Cecil, but I think grappling in general is a far more universal, applicable technique than striking. We talked about some of the limitations with striking. With grappling, my main advantage, besides the fact that it's less attribute dependent, is I can control what another human being is trying to do against me. Whereas with striking, I really can't unless I punch you. But
with striking, you're using like an offensive defense. You're not there are parries, there is evasion, there's nuances to striking as well. But you're right. Striking, it's your strikes that are your main defense. Yeah.
Right. And so in that moment that I hit you, okay, I've controlled you for that moment. But as soon as my hands are back, I have no control over you. Whereas with grappling, I can control you, which means it's going to be easier to finish the fight in the way I need it to. But more importantly, I might not need to finish the fight in a negative way. If I can control you and just keep you, and we see this, right, at this point, there are tons of videos out there. And I know people in the gun community may never see them because we always look through our own prism. Right. But if you go to the jiu-jitsu world, there's tons of videos that get shared virally all over where some jiu-jitsu guy has taken down a bad guy and just held him there and stops whatever violence, doesn't have to do anything bad to the bad guy. Cops roll up, boom. That's a much better outcome than me having to mag dump into this guy, right? In this today's society. So I think grappling overall gives you that nothing else does. And like I said, it is done properly with the right methodology, the right instructor. It is far less attribute dependent on than striking or all these other gross motor things. If I can control you, I get double underhooks on you and I have head position and hip position. It doesn't matter that you're 100 pounds heavier than me. I'm controlling that fight and I can continue to control it for a good amount of time until I need to do the next step. And again, that's not hyperbole. That's just me making that up. You could see that. Go to an MMA gym, go to a judo, any grappling gym, jiu-jitsu school around the world. You'll see that happen all the time. So I would say to somebody, look into it, put a little time into it. Don't make it your life. I mean, you might fall in love with it, but just know this is an adjunct to this idea of I need to defend myself and my loved ones, and maybe having this either as a component in conjunction with my shooting or as a replacement in certain situations for my shooting is a good idea.
Yeah. And I would say for those watching and listening, if you're going to check out a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu studio or really anything, if you're looking to augment your shooting skills, learn from someone who is also a shooter, someone who is used to, like Cecil is, combining those two things. Because even though like close quarter shooting, weapon retention, I think that stuff is easier to learn than marksmanship at 15 yards. It's just different. And the 15-yard marksmanship where you don't worry about contact distance weapons, you don't worry about weapon retention, you focus completely on shooting. Well, even though hitting a target up close is easier, there's so many variables, like you said, that guy is animated. So it's not just a paper target. So that becomes complicated. So whatever you're going to do, if you're looking to supplement your shooting skills and give yourself some good weapon retention techniques and strategies, train with someone who's a martial artist who also is a very competent shooter. Cecil, as we wind down here, where can people go to find out more information about what you have going? Maybe they want to sign up for your Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu course, or maybe they want to schedule a seminar. Where can they go to find that information?
Best place right now is iacombatives.com, immediateactioncombatives.com. That's my website, my blog. I try to put, articles up all the time, just free information up there. But it's a good way to get in touch with me or to see what's going on. When I do have seminars, I usually post them up there and have sign up links and stuff like that. So it's usually the best place. Or on the typical social media, Immediate Action Combatives on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. So you can, find me there.
Very cool. Well, Cecil, as expected, man, you were a wealth of knowledge. I really liked talking martial arts and shooting stuff with you, and we'll have to do it again, brother. Well, guys, that's a wrap for this episode with Cecil Burch. If this episode resonated with you, be sure and let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Aimpoint's Taking Aim Podcast. We'll see you next time.